scriptures, and I tried to make sure the volume, my volume, um, my audio was working, but I guess my audio wasn't working. So I'm gonna try to my phone is dying too. I'm gonna try to make this faster than the live I just ended. You know what I'm saying? So let me get my phone right. Um, I know in the beginning of my last live, I came on here because I was watching a video on YouTube about Dr. Candace Matthews, and what I said on that live. I hope y'all can hear me. What I said on that live, um, I found it fascinating that um, the information she was bringing out in regards to the judges, the judge, um, and a lot of people in that county, the judge having a couple of lawsuits out on him allegedly, right? And she brought proof, documentation about it. She brought saying that the judge that was over the Carmelo Anthony um, case, that he allegedly has lawsuits of him being a child abuser. Okay, this was what's bringing me on this live today, right? She brought information on the attorney of the Anthony family about and I hope y'all can hear me or whoever, because man, I did like an hour live and there was no audio. But she brought out information that the attorney that represented the Anthony family um uh has had lawsuits out on him allegedly about I guess what you call that, what would you call that, basically taking advantage of women, you know what I'm saying, insulting women. There was somebody else. So you had in the the DEA. The DEA got lawsuits out on them about a lot of sexual mixed conduct and stuff like that, right? And I found it fascinating. And after listening to her, I began to have a change of heart about voting as well. So I'm like, man, you know what? Voting is something that probably is very important. Not even probably, it is. It's just we have to educate ourselves. You know what I'm saying? The more of us educate ourselves, about the laws, and I think we have a greater impact. You know what I'm saying? So that's what brings me on here today. And I think that because when I was listening to Dr. Candace Matthews, um, you know, she, they connected. You know what I'm saying? She's over. She's has a high position in the Black Panther Party. So, and I find that fascinating how they involved in a lot of politics and laws and stuff like that. So I'm like, man, this is interesting. So I think to some degree, as religious people, especially amongst the Hebrews, and how we don't advocate for certain um, political matters, um, that's very interesting to me. And like, I'm gonna sit on that, and I don't know, man. I'm having a change of heart when it comes to a lot of that. Not to say prophetically what's not going to happen to America and like it'll be, you know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. But um so before I get up out of here, I went through a few scriptures, and I started off in Deuteronomy chapter 1 when I was on here for an hour, and I recognized could nobody hear me, right? So I started off in Deuteronomy chapter 1, and I think I started at verse 16. And reason why I'm coming on here because I'm realizing, like, damn, so you have a lot of these judges and prosecutors and lawyers, right, that are wicked, right? that have no that do not you know what I mean, they in honorable positions and not being honorable, basically, right? And let me say this to all you Hebrew Israelite leaders out there, Christian leaders and Muslim leaders that don't know how to network with one another. I think that's a sign, that's a big problem that uh, a lot of us have, a lot of the leaders have. They don't know how to network with one another, all because of their difference, which is very childish and says a lot about y'all arrogance. But in the book Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 16, it says, I charge your judges at that time, saying, hear ye the cause between your brethren, and judge righteously between every man and his brother. Right? So here it is, Moses, whom the Most High entrusted to uh, instill into the people the way to deal with certain matters in the community, right? And Moses is saying, when you judge, you are to judge in this matter, right? He says, judge righteously between every man and his brethren, right? So don't do no scheming, no scamming, no injustices when it comes to judging. And the strangers that is with him, right? So when it comes to any uh matters outside of your race of people, or whatever the case may be, don't the the, the, the same basically treat everybody the same way, no matter if they're related to you or not. Verse 17, ye should not respect persons in judgment, right? So respecting persons, right? There's nothing wrong with respecting persons, but there's something wrong with respecting persons in judgment when it comes to decision making. And reason why I say that is because there's a certain level of respect you give to a judge, an officer, a father, a mother, an elder. There's a certain level of respect that you give to, in particular, humbling that you show towards these specifics, right? That you may not, you know what I'm saying, you give to a sibling. The same way you treat a judge, you may, or a father, or act to a father, the same respect you have for a father, you may not have the same respect for a sibling. It's different. The respect level is different, right? But we are not to respect man's person in judgment. But ye shall hear the small as well as the great, right? So no matter the rank and order, no matter, you know, if you're a stinking king or you're a peasant, right? Ye should not be afraid of the face of a man, for the judgment is God's, right? So on and so forth, right? So then, that's what we wrestling against, right? There's a lot of leaders, right, that fail at that. And before I move forward, let me find the scripture where it says, it was Moses' father-in-law, right? He was telling Moses, you can't judge all these people by yourself. That's what Moses' father-in-law was trying to tell him, right? So let me let me let me see if I can find that real quick. I hope I can find it, and then I'm going to get something else. Because when it comes to a lot of these Hebrew leaders, you know what I mean, um, they're doing a disservice to a lot of people, right? So let me see if I can find it. If not, I'm going to move forward. You know what I'm saying? And again, I was inspired to come on here because of the Carmelo Anthony case, and like kind of express my thoughts uh, concerning it. Right? Egyptians. So let me find Moses, and when he's speaking, is it right here? Do not make them know this. Hold on. Okay, I think I found it, you guys. All right. Here's something else we got to point out, and this is a big problem within a lot of religious settings, right? So this is Moses' father-in-law. Now, remind you, Moses' father-in-law is not an Israelite, right? Uh, Moses' father-in-law is an Ethiopian, if I'm not mistaken, right? If I'm not mistaken, right? Uh, okay, and with uh Moses' father-in-law, he had discernment that Moses couldn't judge all these people on his own, so he gave him wisdom, righteous advice, right? So in the book of Exodus chapter 18, right? And this shows you that God is not just upon Israel, right? At least in a lot of different aspects, right? But amongst many nations of people, despite of what scriptures they use. Because they will use, he shows his word unto Jacob, his laws and statutes unto Israel. He have not dealt so with any other nation. That's specifically speaking to what? The Most High laws and his judgment. Doesn't mean the Most High doesn't deal with other races of people, right? The Most High specifically gave his law, statutes, and judgment, his ways unto this particular nation. However, God deals with everybody, right? Uh, it says, it says, Exodus chapter 18, verse 20, and thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shall show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. Moreover, verse 21, thou shalt provide out of all people able men, such as fear God. So when it comes to leader, one of the qualities that approves that you must be approved to take on a judge position, to be a judge, a overseer of the people, is what? You must fear God. You must have fear of God in you. What's the next quality? Men of truth. So not only you must fear God, and you can replace that fear with respect and honor towards God, right? But men of truth, men that values truth over everything, right? The third thing that qualifies you for being a judge, hating covetousness, right? So these men must hate jealousy and envy, and desire not what belongs to someone else, right? And place such over them. Now, the problem with modern time is that they don't do this, especially amongst the Hebrew community. They don't do this. They show a lot of favoritism. They respect man's person and all that. And this hence why I'm pointing out of what most governments do, right? And it's infested even in amongst our people when it comes to religious settings and others, right? We see it going on with Carmelo Anthony's case when it comes to white supremacy. This is what they do. Now, if white kill a white, they probably better off, even to they better off judging the matter more righteously, right? But if it's white and Asian, white and black, white and any other race, you can respect person in judgment when it comes to quote unquote the white tea people, right? Right? But it says, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, and rulers of hundreds, and rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens, right? Now, this is what most Hebrews would consider being the law, yet they don't practice this. And some of them that do, they don't practice it well, right? You got to put the most loving and caring people, right? And especially people that know what they're doing. If they know what they're doing, set them in that spot. Don't overlook them, right? And just because they able to do something better than you, don't overlook them. Respect what they able to do better than you and put them in that place. But most Elder Ricard ain't doing that. Bishop Nathaniel ain't doing that. Tazariak ain't doing that. so on and so forth. Right? Now, and the reason why they ain't doing that, right? Let's go to Rome. And I ain't, you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to chill out. But let me get to this. Romans, where was I at? I think I was on my other live that nobody was hearing me on. I think I was in Romans 7, I think. Right. All right, this is what most people are struggling with. Now, most people have a problem with philosophy, and they like to utilize the scriptures, Colossians 2 and 8, to say you're not supposed to philosophize and you're supposed to find everything contained in the book. That's not true, right? Paul philosophized, Christ philosophized, Solomon philosophized, right? The problem is when we have these trains of thoughts, right, that has no truth in it and it's deceitful, it's lies, it's trickery. That's the problem when it comes to philosophy, trains of knowledge, right? When it has no truth in it. That's the problem with. That's what you have to be. It says, beware of philosophy and vain deceit. So beware of the tricks of the mind, the tricks of knowledge, right? Because it can deceive you, right? Now, here it is. Paul is recognizing something, and the Most High shows him something, right? And he begins to explain this to the people, right? He says, for what he say, what? Romans 7 and 5. For when we were in the flesh, the motions of sins which were by the law did the works did work in our members to bring forth fruits of death. Verse 6. But now we are delivered from the law. Now, watch this. He said, we are delivered from the law. How are we delivered from the law? Why is he saying that? Why must we be delivered from the law? What is he talking about? That being dead, wherein we were held. What being dead? Is he talking about the law being dead? Or he talking about us being dead from the law? What is he talking about? That we should serve in, hold on, that being there when we were held by the law, that we should serve in newness of spirit and not in oldness of the letter. What what shall we say then? Is the law sin, right? So is Paul saying the law is dead? The law is no longer, we're no longer held by the law, right? But because we're no longer held by the law, does that make the law sin? Is what he's saying? What he say? God forbid. He said, no, I have not known sin but by the law, right? So he's saying just because the law, we're no longer held by the law. Question is, what is he talking about when it comes to the law? Two, he said, what he say? He said, what he say? He said, what shall we say then? Is the law? No, he says, that we should serve in newness of spirit and not in oldness of the letter. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? God forbid. Nay, I had not known sin, but by the law. So he said he know what sin is because of what the law called sin out to be. Right? He says, but by the law. For I have not known lust except by the law. So without the law he wouldn't know what lust is. Right? Thou thou shalt not covet. Right? Except the law said, thou shalt not covet, which is lust, right? Right? So it is the law pointing out what not to do. And one of the things the law said not to do is not to covet. But if, but, but just because he's saying we are delivered, he says, but now we are delivered from the law. Is he saying, is he saying you're allowed to, you're allowed to covet? If we no longer have to abide by the law, is he saying, okay, you're allowed to covet? That's not what he's saying, is it? If you use your natural mind and you use your spirit to dictate what is just and what is right, you cannot be deceived by the words of men, right? Because Christians will say the law is done away with, but they won't specify and articulate how, right? They just say the law is done away with. And then Hebrews will slip up and do the same thing and say, well, we got to obey the law. We got to obey the law, right? And then they make the law, to have us feel like in captivity to. I have a hard time explaining it, but let me do my best to explain this, right? He says, what shall we say then? Is the law sin? No, it is not sin. I have not known sin but by the law, right? Let's move forward. But sin, taking occasion by the commandment, wrought in me all man. No, let's jump down. He said, verse 9, for I was alive without the law once, but when the commandments came, sin revived and I died. So, what I get out of this verse when he says, for I was alive without the law once, right? So, this is what I get. He knew nothing of the law at one point in time, right? But when the commandments came, when he began to understand the law, right? Sin revived and I died. So now I get what he's saying here, because I was being tricked at some point reading this at first in my first line. But when he became aware of the law, the commandments of God, right? He recognized this. So when he said sin revived, he recognized what sin was, right? And then he died. Did he die physically? No, he's talking about he 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 stopped doing the wrong things. The old him died. The sinful him, the wrongful him died, is what Paul is saying here. Verse 10, and the commandments which was ordained to life, I found to be unto death. What is he saying there? In the commandments which was ordained to life, I found to be unto death. And I think he's saying, right, the commandments that was meant, right, that's made for us to live, right, I found to be unto death. And I think what he's saying is like him killing the wrongful him, the sinful himself, the fleshly him, right? Verse 11, for sin, taking occasion by commandment, deceived me, and by it slew me. Verse 12, wherefore the law is holy, and the commandments holy, and just and good. Right? See how he's saying the law is holy? Right? But then the first verse we read in verse 6, he says, but now we are delivered from the law. Right? That being dead wherein we were held. Right? So here, why is it appearing as if he's saying we don't have to abide by the law? What is exactly Paul is saying? What exactly is he saying? Because it sounds like he's talking in two different kind of ways, right? All right. Verses 13. Was then that which is good made death unto me? God forbid. But sin that is made. Now let's jump down. Verse 14. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold unto sin. Right? So Paul is pointing out what? Right? What he read concerning the law about thou should not covet, he understand that is spiritual. That is a holy thing. Thou should not covet. It is a spiritual thing to not covet, right? But he said, I am carnal, right? So he's saying, I am in this fleshly body, sold unto under sin. Why did he say sold unto sin? There's something that he recognized that this fleshly body has to deal with while on earth, right? Let's continue. Verse 15, for that which I do, I allow not. I don't know what he mean by that, because he's saying what he do, he allow not. I don't understand that. For what I would, that do I not. So what he want to do, he find himself not doing. But what he hate, but what but what I hate, that do I. So what he hate, he find. Say you hate committing adultery, but you find yourself committing adultery or fornicating, right? This is what Paul is saying. Verse 16. If I then, I do that which I would not, I consent unto the law that it is good. Right? So he recognized that the law is pointing out what not to do and what to do and identifying what is good. He recognized that the law is good because it's because of the law, because the law says it, right? Now then, verse 17, now then it is no more than I that do it, right? So he's saying, Paul is saying, he recognizing that when he find out him doing something that he don't want to do, he recognized there's another law present, right? He says, if then I do that which I would not, I consent unto the law that is good. Verse 17. Now then, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. For to will is present with me. Right? So the good things that he desire are present. But how to perform that which is good, I find not. Right? So things that he want to do, found himself not doing, though it's with him, he found himself not doing. So he asked himself how to perform what that is good. Verse 19. For the good that I would, I do not. But the evil which I would not, that I do. Right? Verse 20. Now if I do that I would not, it is not more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. So he sees something. What is Paul seeing? Because he's saying, the good that I know to do it, I don't do it. But the bad that I know that is bad, that I shouldn't do it, that I find myself doing. What did Paul, revelation did Paul come into? Verse 21. I find then a law that when I would do good, evil is present with me. This is Paul coming into a discernment, a revelations about another law at play that at some point he probably couldn't understand and he was confused. But then the Most High pointed something out and he recognized it, that there's another law. How do we know this? Let's go to Galatians. How do we know this? Galatians chapter 5, right? Galatians chapter 5, verse what? 17. No, let's get 16. This I say then, walk in the spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. That's that law of the flesh. So basically, what we are wrestling against is deciding with spiritual things instead of fleshly things. You get offended, you respond fleshly. You get offended, you respond fleshly, right? But instead, if you coming into an offense, respond spiritually. Thus, you would not fulfill the lust of the flesh, or the law of the flesh, rather. Right? The law of the flesh. Let's continue, right? You should not fulfill the lust of the flesh, which is a law. For the flesh lusts against the spirit. And so when it says lust, it covets. It covets. Wow. And that's true because we just read that in Romans. So when you read in Galatians 5 and 17, it says, for the flesh lust against the spirit. So when it says lust, it's not as if the flesh is desiring the spirit. Like the flesh desires the spirit. That's not what it's saying. It's saying the flesh covets, it's jealous, right? It envies it's covetous over the spirit, and the spirit covet to it over the flesh, depending on which one is winning the battle, right? And the spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary one to another, so that they cannot do the things that they would. So when the spirit is losing, right, it is not doing the things that it would, right? it would have you do, so on and so forth, right? And when the flesh is losing, right, it envies the spirit because it's unable to do what the flesh wants to do because it has to yield to the spirit, right? uh Verse 18, but if ye be led of the spirit, ye are not under the law. This goes back to what? This goes back to Romans what? Romans 7 and 6, when he says, but now we are delivered from the law. You see that? When you follow the spirit and you don't follow the fleshly law, but you follow the spirit of the law, right? The law no longer applies, right? You're not under the law. Under what law? You're not under the law of what? The flesh. And what comes with the flesh? Death, penalties. That's pretty much where it's getting at. Death and penalties, right? So you no longer have to worry about a conviction when you follow the spirit of the law. But when you follow the fleshly things of the law, because what happens when you constantly commit grape on people, right? What happens when you constantly unalive people, right? What happens when you constantly steal and blase blase? It leads to severe punishment. What happens when you constantly commit adultery and things of that nature? It leads to severe punishment. You see? You see what I'm saying? Right? So why did I come on here today? Right? To point some of those things out, to point out some of the things we wrestle against, right? The spirit against the flesh, flesh against the spirit, right? And Paul also mentioned something I didn't read that I read in my last slide that y'all couldn't hear me on, is he found another law, and it's about the law of the mind, right? The law contained in the mind, where you're able to make decisions according to, are you going to obey the spirit, or are you going to obey the flesh, right? And remember what I said. A lot of religious folks think philosophy is wrong and you have to prove every single thing when you don't really, because not everything can be proven, right? You know what I'm saying? So we need more people that's willing to have tough conversations. We don't need no more people like these elder Ricards out here, you know what I'm saying, um, trying to dictate the invisible spirit of truth. Truth is a spirit. No one can dictate it. uh, we can only keep our ears open and ready to receive when the time comes, when the Most High is showing something and want us. The scripture say, he that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says. You know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, a lot of people miss out on a lot of what the Spirit says. Because the Spirit comes and it goes over here and it goes over there and it's over there. And a lot of people say, I ain't going over there. I'm staying over here. And the Spirit is gone and is left. You see what I'm saying? But I hope y'all could have heard me this time. I'm finna chill out. If you're not at peace, I pray one day you reach peace. For those that's at peace, we pray you remain in your peace and continue to be an example for those that's not at peace. Shalom.